In this video, I will explain every single thing you need to know about the Create Post-Processing update. This video should bring you from not knowing what any of these things are to a complete expert, to being able to make literally anything your heart desires, to being able to automate everything in the game. What are my credentials? I've automated everything in the game. I've done it like 4 times. It's so possible. And it's all possible with, I keep saying it's a new update. It has been out for almost a year, the Create Post-Processing update. I will be covering just the things added in this mod that I think are actually useful. What that means is the packager, repackager, the Frogport, stock link, stock ticker, and factory gauges. And I'm gonna be honest, I've never used any of these 3 things in my year of playing. That doesn't mean they're not useful, but that does mean once you know how these things work, these are a piece of cake. What I'm not going to be covering is the redstone requester, the red tablecloth or any of the tablecloths, and white postbox. This tutorial assumes you have a basic grasp on the Create mod itself. If you don't, I will link on the screen now in the top right corner, hopefully, the ultimate guide, starter guide to the Create mod. I walk you through everything from getting your first bit of normal vanilla tools up until basically this. It's a starter guide. It will get you most of the way there, and it's about an hour long. You can skip through. And in this video, my goal is to make sure that you are comfortable with everything here. In a week or 2, I will be releasing a follow-up video to this, giving you challenges and things that you can practice with in order to make your knowledge of this a little bit stronger. Think of them as labs. They'll basically be, hey, I have items here. I want to transfer them here. How do I do that? Right now, you may not know this. And in an hour, you may be like, psh, that's so easy. There will be more challenging ones. Like, let's say I can take out items here and send them to either location. How do we do that? Things like that. It should be very fun, and it should give you hands-on experience with this. I hope that you'll be able to do both of these at the same time. So let's say I cover something pretty basic, like moving items from here to here using packages. I will have an associated module in that lab video explaining how to do it, and there will be a world download for that challenge as well. I hope that all made sense. If not, I re-recorded it. So to start off this video, we are going to start with the very basics. A packager. This is kind of the bare minimum to get into packages themselves. I've set up a little demo over here, kind of explaining what the heck packagers are and why you should even care about them. Even this basic functionality is still quite helpful. Let's pretend we have a bunch of wool in this chest and we want to bring it over to this chest. Obviously, you could do this by hand, but let's say it's a little bit more complicated than a chest to another chest. What you would do in the normal Create mod is have funnels dropping items and then having them go into the chest here. There are some general issues with this. The more challenging ones we'll cover later, but the most basic one is, hey, this is going 1 item at a time. If we wait for this, it would take probably 6 months. So that's where the packagers come in. Packagers are really nice for the bare minimum that they will transfer multiple stacks of items in a single block. Before we can transfer those items though, we need to figure out how to make the packagers package. There are technically 3 modes for a packager, one of which is a little bit weird. For our use case right now, there are 2 modes, powered by redstone and not powered by redstone. Currently, it's not powered by redstone, it's not doing anything. If we power it with redstone, hey, would you look at that? We made our first package. Easy peasy. This package is an item. It fits in your item doohickey. It is unstackable, kind of like a shulker box. You can see when you hover over it, it shows, hey, you got a bunch of items in here. For us, they're all smooth stone. You will also notice that it is 9 stacks of smooth stone. Hello. It's weird that just disappeared. How bizarre. You could pretty easily guess, hey, if this does 9 stacks of items, transferring all of these items with packages should be a breeze. And yeah, you're right. But we're not done figuring out how the packagers work. So hold your horses. Now that we have a package, how do we get the items from it? Because right now it's super useless. Well, the easiest way is you punch it. It'll drop all 9 stacks of the items that you put into it. It also doesn't have to be a full 9 stacks, but for us it was. It'll drop every stack inside of it, and you can pick it up like you would items. You've played Minecraft before. I don't even know why I'm trying to explain this to you. There's also using the other option of a packager, the off mode. So let's put in our package into the packager. And would you look at that? It unloads all 9 stacks in the first inventory slot all the way to the end. You could also see if we do it with less than 9 stacks of items, it will still pick up all of those. So that is 5 stacks there, and we can put this in and see, well, there we go, 5 stacks. There are also some other fun functions with it. If you keep the packager powered, it will request multiple packages, and we can go ahead and put those in here. You will also notice weird. When we get to a spot where we cannot fully unload a package, the packager will not allow us to put it in. This is something to keep in mind. It's more of a design constraint. If, let's say, you need packages to flow into a specific place consistently, like let's say you have funnels, it's not going to pick it up until you remove enough items for the package to actually get unloaded. Before we get back to our example, there is one more thing that we need to talk about. Signs will work for designating where a package is going to go. We'll get into this more later, but just for now, if let's say we request a package or power on the packager with a sign connected to our packager, you will see that on the packager now, we will have a orange bit of text saying this is going to our storage system, which is the sign we have on our packager. This will be super, super useful later with Frogports and package filters, which again, we'll get into later, but let's just pretend it's gonna go in here and there we go, package. So how is this useful for our design? As I mentioned, we could do multiple stacks at a time, which means this is gonna go a whole lot quicker. All we have to do to upgrade our design is, well, first put a packager over on our sending chest and a packager on our receiving chest, and we should be able to send packages off. We will, of course, need to power the thing. So let's power it on, and we can see one package being sent out and another one following, and there is all of the items in our chest. They will be unloaded as quick as that, leaving our belt free for other operations. If you played the Create mod in the past, you will have almost certainly run into times where your belt is too full of materials maybe that you're mining or that you're processing at a crushing wheel system. All of that is less impactful since you can stack up to 9 either different types of items or 9 stacks of items at a time. That is the basics for the packager. There's an on and off version, you can send and receive stuff, and signs will dictate where they go. Now let's move on to how to actually use that, because even though that was a cool example, I will be totally honest, it's not super practical. So how our packages really shine is with storage systems. There is a block in the game called an item hatch, which if you right click will deposit items held in your hand. So let's say I have a bit of item vaults. If I right click it, it will then go into a storage system. You can also shift right click and deposit your whole inventory. So you can see this is now empty, fantastic, which is great for if you go on a mining session and you come back, you could just do this and then you're good. Your hotbar will stay the same. But now how do we get our items out of the item vault? This honestly was one of my biggest complaints with the Create mod before. Previously, you had to use a funnel or a chute to filter out specific items that you wanted out of this thing. Using packagers alone does not fix our problem. For example, if we flick this on to request a bunch of packages, as you can see in here, it seems pretty random. There are a lot of items, but there's no real way to tell the game that you want certain items, which means with this setup, if you ever want a certain item, you'll have to request your whole storage system, which isn't ideal. So how are we supposed to get items out of our storage system? And this is where it gets a little bit more complicated. The two items that we need to think about now are a stock link and a stock ticker. These are both incredibly useful and close to the most complicated ones. I think they are kind of tied with the factory gauges over here, but let's kind of explain how these work over here. So the stock ticker and stock link do nothing on their own. They need something called a network to actually communicate with anything else. When you place down either a stock link or a stock ticker, you can see at the bottom of the screen, the new link network started text pop up. Basically what you're doing is you're setting up a new storage system. That's all it is. There are 3 different items that can connect to your new storage system, and that is a stock ticker, a stock link, and a factory gauge. This we're going to get into later. That one's the most complicated. The way you connect either a stock link or stock ticker up to an existing storage network is by right-clicking one of the blocks that is a part of that network. In the future, if let's say you have a bunch of these things all scattered around your base and a bunch of stock links scattered around your base, you could click any one of them, and then you can see they will all light up as if they're a part of the same network. Because they are, that's the whole point. What this means is that basically they can talk to each other. This one can request items. It's very, very cool. But how do we use these two things to make a storage system that isn't dumb and stupid? The first thing we need to do, potentially counterintuitively, is to figure out how to interact with the stock ticker. If you right click it, it says set a mob or blaze burner next to this block to use it. That's pretty straightforward. Basically what it's saying is put a blaze burner next to it and this thing will show up. The same is true for if you put a mob there. So a sheep will work. You can click on the sheep. Bad guy mobs also work. I really wouldn't recommend doing this. They'll still attack you. For the rest of this tutorial, I'll be using blaze burners just because they're a little bit easier and they don't bah every 4 seconds. But if you're not at the blaze burner stage, you can always use a seat and any mob that you can find. Once we get started with interacting with this thing, we need to figure out how to view linked packagers. What the heck is that? That's a fantastic question. And this is the third phase or kind of setting for a packager. As we've learned, we have an on and off version, but there is a third secret version that has to do with stock links. Once you configure a stock link to a stock ticker and place it on a packager, the packager will turn green. This then connects our packager to the create network and basically makes it controlled by the stock link itself. I do believe this means that redstone transmitted into the packager no longer works. You can't really affect it. All your changes has to go through the stock link. This is incredibly beneficial because when we have our packager that's controlled by a stock link and we put some items in an inventory, this can be basically any inventory, vanilla or modded, it should show up in our stock keeper over here. If you run into an instance where your items are definitely in the chest, but they're not showing up in our stock keeper here, you need to make sure that you have linked this stock link to our stock ticker here. If we break this and remember to right click it, tune it to the network, and then connect it, it'll start showing up. We can then confirm our stock link is working as expected. If we try to click some item vaults and click send down here, that will create our first automated package. Ideally now, we'd like to get our package from here into maybe our storage system. We can use belts for this and funnels just like we used in our original example over there and set it up so that our package can be dropped out onto this belt, be brought over to another packager over here, which we can then have go into a chest. And there we go, we have a super simple requesting system. Our package will be dropped off after it's requested, go in and be placed into our storage. This is a pretty straightforward system, but what happens if we want to send items to multiple locations? I've made a simple example here where we have a pressing system, which will get items into our packager, press whatever the item is, our access point storage, where we will be able to interact with the items that we request from the storage system, which is back here. I have just replaced the chest that we used in our first example with an item vault. We'll be able to interact with our items in our stock keeper as usual, but now we need to figure out how to get items from our storage system over here all the way to our pressing system over here, basically going right through the brass funnel that we have here. If we were to request items, no matter what the name is, you can see I've labeled this pressing. No matter what, our brass funnel is going to pick it up because it doesn't have a filter set to it. And a standard list or attribute filter is not going to work. That's where package filters come in. Package filters are an item added in the create post-processing update, which, similar to a normal filter, sets a filter for a package. There are two real ways to set a destination for a package. The first and simpler way is to put a sign on a packager, and this will set, in the orange text there, the destination for the storage system, which is the exact text shown on the sign here. If we wanted to, we can set our package filter to storage system. And if we had a package filter on our funnel set to storage system and dropped our package in front of it, it would get picked up and all of the contents would be dropped in our chest here. If we then change our package filter to something other than storage system and try to do the same thing, this will not get picked up. The other way to set package filters that I have not told you about is to set it in the package address field, and this is available in a few different places. For right now, it's available in the stock keeper. What this means is if we set this to the storage system, request 2 chests, our stock link will automatically create a package with 2 chests designated to the storage system. So basically what this does is it automates the lever and the sign that we needed to use over in that example and is able to do it in one block, and it will dynamically allocate those addresses. So back to the task at hand, how can we bypass this funnel and have whatever our package is that we want to press go over to our pressing station? The answer is pretty simple. We set up a package filter and set it in our brass funnel there. And then when we request an item to the storage system, let's do 5 item vaults, we should see this storage system package get brought along and picked up by our storage system funnel. Amazing. If we then did the same thing and set this to pressing and we requested 1 iron ingot, what we'll see is this package go down, absolutely bypass our funnel here, and head over to this funnel here with no filter. This would also work if this funnel has a filter set to pressing which was the destination of that package. And there we go, we have automated both our storage system and a processing element in our system. This is perfect for small and compact builds that you only want to do a few different packages for. But this becomes a really big problem with scaling. Let's say you wanted to scale this up to have 10 or 20 different package addresses. You could create a brass funnel and a package filter for every single one. You could create belts going to each and every processing section, but that would become very complicated very quickly. And this is where our package Frogport and a chain conveyor. Both of these work in tandem together to do what we've just done here, but in a much more scalable fashion. Before we get into using chain conveyors or package Frogports in our storage system, let's go over what the heck they do and what they're for. Chain conveyors require a chain conveyor to be connected to another chain conveyor to function. This is semi-similar to shafts and belts, where belts can't really be used until they're connecting two shafts together. Chain conveyors are used by connecting two chain conveyors together with a chain item. I'm in creative, so I was able to connect these with one chain, but if I switch to survival, it's going to tell me I am not holding enough chains to perform this connection. What this means is that depending on how far away our chain conveyors are, they use either more or less chains. So in the previous example, where it was shorter, it needed 4 chains, and now it needs 10. As you can also see, it does not need to be perfectly straight, unlike belts. You can chain 2 chain conveyors at an angle, height-wise, or on the X and Z axis. It also works diagonally on the Y axis, but only to a certain point. If we bring them really close, there is a maximum slope limit, which we have reached. So that's something to keep in mind. I like setting up my chain conveyors with a shaft connecting them. They do have a shaft connection point in the center, and I think it makes it look pretty cool when you connect them together. It makes it look a little bit like power lines. As of right now, these aren't going to be any use to us. Chain conveyors need power in order to function. I'm going to hook up a creative motor to one of these, and as you can see, once one chain conveyor is being powered, all other chain conveyors connected to each other will be powered as well. This is a great way for transferring power across long distances and even through shafts down to other chain conveyors over to other things. So it's a much cleaner way of transmitting power, which even adds to that power line aesthetic. There are more benefits to the chain conveyors, however. If we were to grab ourselves a package and put it on a chain conveyor, the package will ride the chain conveyor. In our example, this thing is going to spin around indefinitely around this chain conveyor because it has nowhere to go. We have a cardboard package designated for the storage system, but the package doesn't see a storage system on this line. In fact, there's no way to get packages off of this line in general. This is where the package Frogport comes in. This is the thing that's going to interact with our chain conveyor so that you don't have to stand here for the next 40 years right-clicking the chain conveyor indefinitely. This will do that for you. If you right-click on a packaged Frogport, it'll open up the GUI. If it's not connected to anything, it'll look like this. You could change the name to, let's say, storage system, and that's about all you can do. It does act as an inventory, but only for packages, as you can see. I'm not able to put in chain conveyors or any other non-packaged item. This isn't actually useful though, because, well, it's not going to interact with the chain unless you choose for it to. So before you place down your packaged Frogport, you need to select a point on the chain for it to interact with. There is, of course, a max distance to this, so this is too far away. And I don't show it here, but the Frogport needs to be level or below the chain conveyor itself. It cannot be above it. We could put down our packaged Frogport here, and as you can see, it is now connected to an object, and there are 2 more options that have popped up. The first one being send and receive packages, and this one being only send packages. What this will let you do is if you don't want it to collect stuff, you can set this value, and if you want it to both send and receive things, you could set it to this one. We'll go into why you may want to change these later. Let's say we've set it up to send and receive packages, and we change the name to storage system. Once we click yes on that, we should see these packages start heading towards our Frogport. The game somehow knows that, hey, a new thing has been added to our chain conveyor line that matches the destination that these packages are trying to go to. This means that the Frogport will snatch them off the chain and collect them in its internal inventory. In order to process these items though, the Frogport needs to output these packages into an inventory itself. This unfortunately means we've built it wrong. There's no way to put an inventory because the floor is there. So we'll pick this up and try again. Let's grab ourselves both a barrel and a packager, and we will perform 2 tests here. The first one, let's put our Frogport on top of the barrel. Since the barrel is an inventory, we can rename this and see our packages come around. And once they arrive, the Frogport will pick them up and output them into our barrel here. This kind of just moves where the package is. Ideally, we would want maybe the Frogport to dump it straight into a packager to empty the contents of what was in the package into a barrel. So let's put our Frogport on top of a packager here and see what happens. It goes into the packager depackages our items and puts the items themselves in the inventory instead of the package. This is obviously ideal because, well, we want to use the items. We don't really want to use the packages. The packages are just for transportation. The next question is, how in the world do we send packages out? Well, we've already learned that we can create packages in 2 ways. Either by powering our packager or by using a stock link like what we've used over there. The great thing is that the Frogport knows that when a package is created, its job is to send it out. Remember, in this inventory, there are only options to send and receive or just send. There's no option to just receive. So no matter what, this thing is programmed to send packages out when this packager creates a package from the inventory. What I mean by that is if we power this thing, it'll create a package and our Frogport will immediately send it out. No questions asked. Since we don't have a sign on our packager, this will have no destination. But let's say we put a sign on here, designated to itself. This will perform the same action, as long as I have items in here. And it will send out packages, both of which are designated to the storage system. If we speed this up, both of these packages will come around and be picked up again by the same Frogport. We can make this a little bit more useful by creating another Frogport, let's say pressing, and this is being used to simulate what we have over there, the pressing and storage system. Let's say I have both of these 2 items and I want all of my items all the time to go to pressing. We can rename it and send out our packages. This package will now be named pressing and be picked up by our pressing Frogport over here. And that is how we transfer items using packagers and our chain conveyors. Moving back over to our storage system example. The goal here is to convert all of this mess of wires and belts and funnels and all that stuff into a simple system using Frogports and packagers. This is 100% something I would recommend trying at home if you've never built this sort of thing. So please do check out the video that I've linked in the description for the kind of challenges that I have set up here. You can also just copy this right now if you wish. So to get started, we're going to just set up our chain conveyors going all the way across and connect them up with a chain. We're then going to grab our Frogports, connect them to the chain, and go all the way along the line here. We'll do the exact same setup that we had before. I haven't named any of these Frogports yet. All I've done is connect them to the chain. Now comes the naming. What I would do is set up a naming scheme and stick to it. I like just doing storage or storage system for my storage, access point for the things that I'm going to be able to access with a chest, and then pressing, crushing for any of my processes. It really doesn't matter what you name it, as long as you can remember what you have named it. So now we can go ahead and power our chain conveyor and try to request some items. As a reminder, I've named this access point. To request an item, I am going to request some white wool and set our destination to the destination that I've named our Frogport, which is access point. This will have our package float all the way around, get in the way of our access point, which should pick it up right away and ingest it immediately. And as you can see, we have our white wool obtained pretty much automatically. You will notice that we didn't need a sign or a lever for this packager, since it is using a stock link and our stock ticker to request those items. You can do the same thing with, let's say, a piece of iron ingot and send it to pressing. This will send our package over passing access point, because that's not the right destination, and be delivered to our pressing system. That will then immediately get triggered and start our processing. There's one other thing to note. If you have something named incorrect and you don't have a destination for that thing, if you try to send something to it, the package will just spin around aimlessly on the closest chain conveyor that it can reach. If you see this happening, just grab the package and see where it's destined to. I don't have a thing called incorrectly, so I know that I've somehow accidentally sent one with the wrong name. This is super useful for troubleshooting later, so hopefully you remember that. Now that we've created our chain conveyor setup, look how different it is compared to the belt setup. Doing the exact same functionality with way less processing and a way cleaner look. You can only imagine what would be happening if we had pressing, crushing, haunting, smoking, smelting, every single processing thing that you need in the create mod. Doing it with chain conveyors would look pretty good and be pretty doable, and doing it with belts and funnels may get challenging pretty quickly. So why did I even bring up using package filters to begin with? That is because in an ideal world, you want to combine the two, but I think that's a little bit advanced for right now. What we should get into next is an item that I largely neglect in the create mod, except for basically this one purpose. That is a clipboard. Clipboards are insanely useful. They can do a ton of stuff that you probably don't even know they can do. Like, let's say we have a filter here, right click, left click to paste that filter. Did you know you could do that? Yeah, you can. It's crazy. But what it can also do is remember your package destination names for you. The way you do this is by starting a line with hashtag or £, and then just setting your destination. You can know it works because the logo in the front changes to a package. If you don't have the hashtag in front, it'll still be a bullet point that you can check off. I guess you can check off the package, but this is actually a check. If you don't have that, just remember to add a hashtag and it'll change directly to a package. You can either enter those manually, or what you can do is walk up to a Frogport and right click it to add it to your clipboard. If you do that for everything in your array, and you can either place it down or not, it will show up in your quick access, so that let's say I just want 2 bits of iron into our access point, those will get delivered. And let's say, oh, quickly, I want to press 2 more bits of iron. We can send both of those out and it's a lot quicker. I do recommend placing this on a clipboard near your stock ticker just so that you don't lose it. And especially when it gets to 3 or 4 pages long, you're going to hope that you don't lose it, because that is your baby. There's also another clipboard feature that was added in this update that you may not know about and is, again, insanely useful. Let's say we have a schematic in our schematic cannon here, and we have a material checklist that we put on our clipboard. This thing needs a stack and a bit of sails. We can head over to our storage system and request these sails ourselves, but let's just consider that it might be a little bit more challenging of a recipe and you have thousands of different types of blocks in your storage system. It's going to be a pain to try to scroll through and search for everything that you may need. What you can do instead is grab your material checklist and right click it on the stock keeper. For me, this is the blaze burner. And what will happen is it will request exactly the amount of items that it needs for the material checklist and crash your game. Huh? Oddly enough, this crashes my game. However, the package is still sent out. This is very interesting. I'm using Create Fabric, so maybe if you're using that and your game crashes, it's a persistent thing, but I bet it was a mismatch of mods or something that I'm using. This does not happen in any other Create mod version that I've done anything with, so it's probably a me issue. What we can see though is that all of the items that we requested are now in our inventory from our access point. We didn't have to do any of the requesting manually, which basically means if we have all the items that are required for a schematic, building and schematizing and resource gathering for a build is absolutely trivial. So now that I've hopefully hooked you on automating everything and using everything with Create 6 and packages, we need to take a step back and think about how to approach create mod contraptions with packages in the game. If you're an old player, this is probably very useful for you since I see so many people still do it, including other YouTubers. I'm calling out Charlie Delta mostly. About 2 years ago, I built this farm. This farm produces 13 different items and produces a total of 100,000 items an hour. It is absolutely ridiculous, absolutely massive, and at the time, incredibly helpful. It was very, very difficult to make 13 different items in a space this small and compact. And this is what I see people doing frequently. Maybe not to this scale, but in order to make a gold farm, they'll specifically wash sand into soul sand, which is what I'm doing down here, wash that into quartz and gold, and then crush the gold in a crushing system like this. You don't need to do that anymore. Never do that again. Instead, you need to think about the Create mod as a modular-based game. I have a video on 10 of the most important modules, at least in my opinion, but basically what I mean is you want a system dedicated to pressing. It doesn't matter what you're pressing. It could be anything. It can be pulp, it could be cardboard, it could be ingots. The whole job of a pressing system is just to press. This mechanical press does not care what's below it. its whole job is to squish. That's the whole point of this pressing module. This same thing is true for every other module in the game, whether it's crafting, crushing, millstoning, literally everything. What this also means is it's probably a good rule of thumb to only have one pressing machine in your entire Create Mod factory. You shouldn't need any more. You should have one crafting machine. It may have multiple crafters inside of it, but you should only have one machine. You should have one machine for smelting or washing items or smoking items, all one machine. Now that I've instilled fear in you, I have a problem. I have too many packages on the line and my packager is no longer picking up any packages because, well, my depot is full. It's not dropping off any of the items after it's been pressed. So we're kind of at a stalemate. And this is something that we are going to need to work on for every single one of our modules. We need a way to send the items after they've been processed back to our storage system. You could try pausing the video and thinking about how to do this right now if you are maybe unsure of how to do this, but consider how we've set up this section and think back to the beginning of the video, where we used a certain stone-based source of magical energy. Now that you've had ample time to pause, we can go over how to return items after they've been processed back to our storage system. The first step is going to be grabbing our items from our depot and getting rid of them. For whatever reason, and I think this is maybe a bug with packagers and the Frogport being full or something, this doesn't refill with a package anymore. And I'm gonna be honest, I would never do this in your whole life. So what are the other options? Let's move this over to this side just to see this work. And we could set up basically an identical example here. So let's say we have our packager with a Frogport on top of it going into our depot here. This is kind of a janky setup to begin with, and as you've seen, it might break stuff. So what I would recommend, instead of depositing your packages directly onto a depot or a belt, I recommend putting them into an inventory of some sort beforehand. This will have the additional bonus of obviously having more storage for your packages or items, but it'll also avoid any weird issues with depots or belts being a little bit silly. Once we have a barrel here, we can set up a belt and a pressing system, and I like putting my press in the center. You can probably put it elsewhere, but now that we have this, we need a way for our items to come out of our barrel, and then after they've been pressed, I messed that up terribly, we need a way for our items to go into an output barrel here. So this is a much better system compared to what we had over there. The only issue now is we need a way to export our items once they've been processed. So we'll need a second form of a packager and a Frogport there. There we go. This is pretty simple, pretty straightforward, and still very compact and generally understandable. You can understand that the items will come in from a Frogport here, will get deposited into our packager, into our barrel, and onto the belt to be processed. After being processed, it'll go into this output barrel. Now we need to figure out a way to send items from this packager back to our storage system. This is pretty simple to do. You can use a lever or another redstone power source. I really like to use pulse timers for these, since it will send a pulse every 20 seconds or so, instead of sending a pulse anytime there's one object in our barrel here. For this example though, a lever's simple enough and will work just fine. If we just put a lever on it, the package will not have a destination. So you have to make sure to set the destination to storage or whatever you've named your storage Frogport. For us, I think it would be storage system. But now that's our whole process set up. So whenever we would get an iron sheet, it would create a package. If the packager was connected to a chain conveyor, it would send it out and send it back to storage as designated there. We're not done here though. There are some other things that we can do with packagers and messing with packagers to change this up slightly. I'm not going to say it's better or worse than other designs. It is just different though, and it's helpful to know what you can do in case potentially you don't have the resources for as many Frogports as we're using or whatever else. So saws have additional functionality in the Create mod. When you put a package on the belt, it will break the package for you and turn it into an object. If let's say we have a package of iron ingots here, we would maybe be able to deliver this to our pressing module, have the saw break our package for us instead of trying to use a packager for it, and then we would process our iron as normal. What would be the benefits to this? First of all, you wouldn't need a packager, so you could have the Frogport go directly into the barrel, which makes it a little bit cleaner to look at. Potentially more importantly, if you're requesting more than a stack worth of items to go into this barrel, it'll actually save space. What I mean by that is if you put a package into a packager, it'll decompress the objects. If you have 2 stacks of objects, it'll fill in 2 slots of this barrel. If, let's say, you keep it as a package, the package will only fill up one slot in the barrel, leaving the rest of the slots available. You know how I said earlier in the video, a hybrid approach between our chain conveyor storage system and a belt-based storage system using package filters is probably the ideal method for using, maneuvering, and working with packages. Well, this is another great example for that. Let's say I wanted to put two systems next to each other, one used for pressing and one used for compacting our iron ingots, or any other ingots for that matter, into their block form. Well, a grand benefit to this is that we can have packages designated for pressing and for compacting, drop them off in the same vault, and then be able to split them up based on their package filter as long as we set the filter value. So let's grab ourselves a pressing filter and set it, of course, to pressing. We could do the same thing with a compacting filter. Let's say we have two packages here, one meant for pressing and one meant for compacting, and we throw them both in the item vault here. We'll see that they both get separated out into the correct lanes and they both start working at the same time. This is absolutely fantastic for a bunch of reasons. One, you can increase compactness while still keeping the modularity of the system setup, and it looks pretty cool. So you might be wondering, how in the world can we have two package filters be named completely different things and get them in the same Frogport? You don't necessarily have to. If you wanted to, you could have a compacting Frogport and a pressing Frogport right next to each other, but that kind of defeats the purpose of having the item vault here at all. You could just have a barrel instead. That would do the same thing. So instead of this, we need to get to another feature of Frogports, and in fairness, package destinations in general. I do think this applies to both Frogports and package filters, but I'm going to be focusing on just the Frogport version of this for now. Packages themselves have a destination, as we've learned. The destination can be basically any string, and if as long as we have a package Frogport that has the same string or can read it, it will grab it. There are special characters though. They'll basically let us do a lot of cool word functionality with our package Frogports and package filters to pick up a wide variety of package names so that we could use the same packager for both compacting and pressing. So how does this all work? I have linked in the description a wiki page to the cardboard package regex page. Regex is a coding thing. If you haven't heard of it, you don't really need to know it. Basically, what you can do is, let's just say asterisk is our new access point. That'll pick up packages labeled for pressing, because asterisk means everything. There are also some other characters that will work, and I'm not really going to go through them right now, but there is something that we can do instead. If we use these curly brackets and have our name be access point, and then separate it with a comma for pressing, we should see the same thing happen. This Frogport will pick up packages meant for pressing or for access point. If we change the name to pursing, it will no longer pick it up, yet we can still request items to our access point and it will pick those up. There's a ton of other examples that are included in the wiki, so if you want to learn more about this, you can. But we can use that technique over here to set our package Frogport name to both compacting and pressing, and this will pick up packages with both names. This is also incredibly useful for things that require multiple different types of processing in the same vein. Consider a fan system where you need to perform a lot of different fanning options like smoking, haunting, smelting, or washing in the same general vibe. Obviously, you would want these close to each other, and instead of having a Frogport for each fan setup, you can get rid of all of these and have one Frogport, maybe labeled fan asterisk, and then use package filters to say, hey, I want this to be fan smoking. And that will drop any smoking fan packages onto the smoking one in particular. All the other fan ones will still work for all the other fan options, and it makes it a whole lot cheaper. So that should be everything you need to know with creating modules that are a little bit more robust, can combine together with other modules, and are generally smarter in design than just having Presco Burr. Now that we have that knowledge, we can move on to factory gauges. Let's get into the automation process of making other things do it for you. Because while it is useful to be able to request iron ingots to be pressed automatically, I would still have to go in and click this 3 times and send it off. If I could automate that process, it means we could probably make everything in the game. And spoiler alert, you can. This is where factory gauges come in. Factory gauges are the third item that needs to be linked to a network. So you can right click either a stock ticker or a stock link, or other factory gauges, if they have a item in them. We'll get to how you do that in a second. But they are able to link to anything on an existing network. Placing factory gauges down, you can place them down on a block face on any of the sides of it. Usually, you'll want to have all of your factory gauges on one side of a block or multiple blocks, since you cannot connect multiple factory gauges together. You can see there, blocks must have the same orientation. You are technically allowed to have factory gauges that will connect across a gap like so. It might look a little bit weird if you're walking through it, but that is physically possible. For the foreseeable future, I'm just gonna have my factory gauges over on this wall here, just for convenience sake. As you've seen me do a few times, you can add items to a factory gauge just by right-clicking on the little white square bits that line up. Once you do, you can see the factory gauge kind of change to then have that item, so in our case, a factory gauge. And if you then click on it with an empty hand, it will open up this GUI. If you don't have an item set, it will open up this GUI, which will say, place an item to monitor. Basically what this is saying is put in an item that you want to craft, create, produce in your factory. Once you create an item, it'll look like this, and you can go into the GUI and it'll look the same if you put it in with just a standard right click or by inserting an item this way. Looking into the recipe GUI, there are two buttons over here at the moment. The first one is you can move your factory gauge, which may be helpful for you later on, so make sure you remember that this is here. And then we also have an add new connection button. We'll get into that in a second. There is also down here a clear button and a save and close button. In the center here, you can see something that looks quite similar to the package destination field that we have over here. That is because it is the same. If you have a clipboard placed down or one in your inventory that has package destinations, these will auto-populate with those values. For now, we're going to leave this blank because I want to walk through a concrete example of how to set up your first factory gauges. Factory gauges can be broken with a wrench if you shift right click them. This is the recommended way of breaking them because apparently if you just click them, it'll break the whole factory gauge on the wall, which probably is not what you want to do. Let's move on to how to organize your factory gauge board. As I said, most people are going to have their factory gauges on one flat wall like this and have them laid out in kind of any orientation that they want. I prefer having a top-down orientation, which just means that my raw resources are going to be at the top. So anything that comes from either a farm, me manually mining it, etc., etc. This could be maybe cobblestone or iron or wood. Anything there are things that I can't generate from crafting or pressing stuff. This is things that need their own dedicated farm and are a raw resource. Below these raw resources, we can have our middle production line items, which can range from actually mid-production items to completed things that only need one more raw resource. And then you keep going down until you get to final products and such. But let's go over a quick example. What I would probably recommend is once you've made your basic storage system, getting set up with factory gauges is the next step, but I recommend automating the factory gauge process because factory gauges are quite expensive. They require precision mechanisms, which are, again, quite expensive, and stock links, which require copper and item vaults, again, relatively expensive. So there are a lot of steps that you are going to need to automate your factory gauges. And in this little demo, I'll show you exactly how I would recommend you do it. So as I mentioned, we're going to start off with our raw resources at the top. These raw resources can be anything, but I am going to put in the ones that I usually have farms for. So for instance, birch logs is one of them. For my tree farm, I can grab cobblestone from a cobblestone farm that I would have. I may have a standalone iron farm. These are probably recommended, even though you can physically make iron through our packaging system. Iron is one of the resources that you're going to need a ton of, so it's good to just have a lot of it. The other things are kind of optional. You may have a copper farm or other farms based on the mod packs that you're using. For me though, I don't think I have any real farm for copper making. So for me, my copper will have to be mined manually. So now that we have our raw ingredients that we are quote unquote farming, let's go ahead and make our first ever automated processing item. Since we have a pressing machine that I have actually gone ahead and upgraded to fit our example over there, this thing should be fully automated from dropping out our package, cutting it up, and then pressing all the items in said package to then be sent out over here. This then sends those items back to our storage system, and we have a pulse timer so that it creates a package every 20 seconds. In order to create an item, we're going to be pressing iron ingots into iron sheets, which means the item we want to monitor is going to be our output, and therefore is going to be iron sheets. we're looking to make these. If we click into our GUI here, we need to add some recipe ingredients to actually make our iron sheet, because otherwise it's going to be like, hey, I'm requesting nothing and I want iron sheets. Why is it not working? So what we can do is add a new connection, click the thing that is used to make it, which in our case, if we look at the JEI recipe, is iron ingots. And we could say we're going to turn 1 iron ingot into 1 iron sheet. The next thing to cover is our package address. We want to send this to the pressing module, which again is the one over there, because, well, we need to press our iron sheet. And then finally, the last thing we want to cover is promises and the expiration time, which can both be found here. To give you a brief understanding of what promises are, they're basically a request that is still pending from the system. So before this, I sent out 30 packages worth of iron sheets, and none of them got back to a storage system with a stock link on them, which makes the game think, hey, we still have 30 iron sheets expected to come back and go into the storage. Obviously, that's not going to happen because, well, nothing's going on here, which means we need to reset our promises in order to get an accurate count of what has been sent out and what is expected to return. You can reset your packages just by left clicking and it'll reset to 0. This is probably the default for your factory gauge. Over to the right is the expiration time. You can scroll up or down to change this value, and it goes up to 30 minutes or does not expire and can be as quick as 30 seconds. You should really only have 2 options for this. Either it does not expire or 30 minutes. I wouldn't recommend going anywhere in between those two because, well, for anything that has a 100% conversion rate, for example, our iron sheets, you're guaranteed to get 1 iron sheet for 1 iron ingot you put into it. There is no reason to have the promises expire. The only thing that will do is if there's a backup for whatever reason because you messed something up, it will keep sending iron ingots out to get squished in iron sheets, making the backup worse and causing more problems. The time where you would want to set a promise expiration is when there is not a guarantee that you're going to get the expected output. An example I like to use is precision mechanisms, since there's an 80% chance that we'll get a precision mechanism at the end of our processing. What this means is that 8 out of 10 times we're going to get a precision mechanism. So if we send 10 gold sheets, we're likely going to get 8 precision mechanisms, but this is not a guarantee. We could get really lucky or really unlucky, and that number may change. So in the case of precision mechanisms, we would want to set this to 30 minutes, but for our case in iron sheets, we can set this to the promise does not expire. From there, you can hover over this and you can see a no target amount set value. If you click and hold, you can see the target amount value that you can choose, and let's just do 10 items for now. When we set that up, you can see there's a green dot in the corner and an arrow pointing upward, currently at 0, saying we have promises open. We can see the processing is already working. We are requesting items automatically to our pressing system. Our pressing system is performing the same cutting up the package to disassemble the contents within it. We are pressing the contents within it, and then we are moving the contents within it to our output storage. That was weird. I wonder how we got an iron ingot here. Is this going to happen again? Very interesting. This is probably a glitch with how fast this is going. What I would probably recommend here is to either expand this by 1, or my guess, and you should be doing this anyway, set these to full stacks. The reason you would want full stacks, or at least the max amount of processing that you can do, is because we want our chain conveyors to be empty most of the time. If we send it out 1 item at a time, we are going to get bogged down with the number of packages, because each package is exactly 1 item, which isn't ideal. If we do instead stacks of items at a time, each package will be a stack of items, and that will be much more beneficial. Let's bump this up to do 10 stacks of iron sheets. We can see the requesting process working a little bit better here, and let's speed up our press because this is going to take a while without it. Oh, interesting. We should probably also speed up the belt, I guess. But the good news is we have automated pressing. We're going at an insane rate, a stack at a time, and we are getting up to our 10 stacks. If we right click on this, you can see we have a ton of iron sheets in our promises and a ton of packages sent out already waiting to be processed. So that is the basics to factory gauges. You've learned it. That's it. That's all there is to it. I'm lying a little bit. They can get a little bit more complicated. And I think the best example is to try to automate factory gauges. These things require some items, precision mechanisms being maybe the most challenging, but we also are going to require crafting ingredients. So how are we supposed to make this? What I like to do when I have a goal of making factory gauges is I like working backwards. It's a little bit easier for my brain to handle, and we're gonna need to stem it out anyway in the factory gauge board before we build all the processing anyway. So it's a good way to lay out your thoughts before getting into the nitty-gritty of each module that you're gonna have to make. So what I like to do is I like to start with my goal recipe. So since our goal is factory gauges, I'm gonna set up a factory gauge down here with the value being factory gauges. One thing to keep in mind, this, I don't know if this is intentional, but it is something I've run into. If you have a factory gauge with a frequency configured, and this also applies for stock tickers or stock links with a frequency configured, if you try putting these in a factory gauge, and let's say you have non-configured factory gauges in your storage system, this factory gauge will not update because it is only looking for factory gauges that are configured with this specific frequency. By default, crafting a factory gauge will not give you a factory gauge with a frequency set. Therefore, you can't have any of the stock link, stock ticker, or factory gauges with a frequency set in a factory gauge and expect it to work. It's just not going to. So instead of maybe right-clicking with a factory gauge itself, I would recommend clicking and dragging an unconfigured factory gauge there. And as you can see, we already have a ton in our storage because, well, that's what I put in there. From there, our factory gauge requires 2 ingredients. The first one being our stock link, and the other one being our precision mechanism. Again, we're just stemming out what everything needs. Our stock link is going to need 2 items as well. First one being a transmitter, the second one being an item volt. The precision mechanism is going to need 4 ingredients. Let's put those all on top here. Those ingredients are a gold sheet, cogwheel, large cogwheel, and actually an iron ingot. So I'm gonna put this here just so that it fits a little bit better in our iron line. It just makes it look a little bit cleaner. Before we go on to making all of the sub requirements for all of these items, let's actually lay this out. So I'm gonna add a new connection for the 2 things that need our factory gauge. From here, you can actually see something very interesting. There is a new button that pops up, which does not show up before, that says use mechanical crafting. This is something we'll get into a little bit later in this tutorial, but what this will do is it will change the recipe slightly to match the crafting recipe that you see in JEI. So by default, it'll be 1, 1, and 1, but as soon as you click this, look at the inputs changing to an unnumbered value and the output changing to the expected number of factory gauges that are going to be in the output. For now, I'm actually gonna leave this unchecked so that we can go through a crafting module example once we set that all up, but that is something that you're gonna wanna remember and use a little bit later. We're gonna set up the same configuration for our stock link using the 2 items that we have here, and you know that we have the right items in here when this pops up. If let's say we didn't have one of those items, it wouldn't pop up, so that's how you can confirm. The precision mechanism is a little bit of a weird one, so I wanted to go through it specifically. This is one of the ones that does not have a guaranteed 1-to-1 conversion rate, so I think it's a pretty fun one to go through. Let's look up the recipe for a precision mechanism. We need 1 golden sheet, 5 cogwheels, 5 large cogwheels, and 5 iron nuggets to give us an 80% chance of gaining a precision mechanism. We want a statistically likely chance of getting a whole number of precision mechanisms. What I mean by that is we don't want 0.8 of a precision mechanism for every time we send a request, because that's going to get sloppy pretty quickly. What we would like to do is, let's say, request 10 gold sheets and get 8 precision mechanisms back. We can do this pretty simply. All we would have to do for this is set this to 10, set this to 8, and then multiply all of these numbers. So each of these are going to require 5 for each gold sheet by 10. So 50 of each of these. We can leave this for now as well. Now that we have these 3 items prepped and ready to go for our modules that we're going to build in a little bit, let's get these sub modules here as well. The item vault is something that requires an iron sheet and a barrel, which we can put there. So we can add that as a new option, and you can see we've done the math right because the mechanical crafting option has now appeared. Wonderful. We're going to do the same thing for our transmitter, and this thing is going to require a few different ingredients. So let's do those 3 now. First one is going to be redstone dust. The next one I'm actually going to put over here just so that it's in line a little bit. That's going to be a copper ingot. And then the final one is a lightning rod and a copper sheet. I got a little bit ahead of myself. The transmitter itself doesn't actually require copper ingots, but the lightning rod does. So let's set all of these up. Our transmitter is going to need redstone. It's going to need lightning rods, and it's going to need copper sheets. Our redstone, I think, is going to be a farmable item like the ones up top here. So actually, just so for consistency purposes, let's move this up to the top. We can pop redstone there, and then all we have to do is reconnect it. I guess theoretically I could have used the move function I forgot that was a thing. This is why that's important. And it stays in this recipe settings, which is a key feature of this function. It also looks like I'm getting a little bit bogged down and messy. So let's actually use the move function for good. Let's move this a little bit further away. So I've gone ahead and moved them around a little bit. They should all be set up still to the correct filters and such. But now we're on to our lightning rod. This is going to need copper, of course. And then we should be good on everything up until the barrel. The barrel, I'm gonna skip ahead slightly, is going to need 3 different blocks or sub-blocks, and since we're using birch, let's just go through all of them right now. A barrel needs slabs and planks to be crafted, and the planks can be used with stripped logs for a little bit better of an output. I know this just because I've played a lot of the game, but you can saw birch logs into stripped birch logs, which can then be sawed into planks for a 6-to-1 conversion instead of the standard crafting recipe 4-to-1. Barrel is going to use both our slabs and our planks, and there we go. It'll be set up for mechanical crafting shortly. The next few things I want to do is our cogwheels and large cogwheels. These are going to be a little bit challenging since both of these require shafts, which I'm going to put here, and shafts require andesite alloy, which is something we do not have yet. Shafts are relatively simple to craft. Andesite alloy is as well. However, andesite alloy requires andesite. I'm getting ahead of myself though. Let's finish up these cogwheels. Those need a shaft and a plank. We'll get into choosing whether we want to set a mechanical crafter for this or potentially a mixer, since those are the kind of 2 main crafting options, as you can see there. Now for our andesite alloy. Andesite is a little bit of a tricky one. This is going to require some advanced processing that I do want to get into to show you how complicated but important some of these steps are to make something really helpful. If you have an infinite lava source, this process may be slightly easier, but I'm going to pretend that we don't, and that we should probably use the diorite and cobblestone crafting recipe. Diorite can be crafted with nether quartz and cobblestone, which is another thing that we're going to need to process. We could do that by washing soul sand, and soul sand is haunting sand, which is crushing gravel, which is crushing cobblestone. So a lot of steps. Let's fill all of those out. So this first one is going to be gravel, into sand, into soul sand, into quartz, and finally into diorite, and that finally into andesite. We're going to make our shaft have andesite alloy, our andesite alloy have andesite and iron nuggets, our andesite be cobblestone and diorite, our diorite be cobblestone and quartz, our quartz be soul sand be sand, sand be gravel, gravel be cobble. That's the whole process. I have omitted something that we can actually kind of already make, our copper sheets. Copper sheets can be made from copper ingots, and these can be pressed. So we could set this up already. Let's get 5 stacks of those. The same is true for gold sheets. We'll need to set up a gold filter here, but that is easy enough to do. And thankfully enough, we actually have basically an existing recipe for gold ingots. If we look at the recipe for gold nuggets, you can see we can wash soul sand to get quartz and gold nuggets. So the existing process that we have to get our quartz here is something that we're also going to use to get our little bits of gold. That is our whole factory gauge board. This is just how my brain works, but I like to go actually top down once I've set up the kind of process that I want to build right now. What I mean by this is I like to start with my raw resources and turn them into the next thing, into the next thing, into the next thing, and then eventually cascade down until we get to the bottom. So basically the inverse of what we just did, but for building the modules themselves. To start, I think it's worth setting up a way to get our raw copper into copper ingots. We kind of have a few options for this. We can either make crushed raw copper, which can then be washed into copper nuggets, which might actually be better because we get an output of clay balls, or we can just cook it. Either way, we're going to need to make a fanning module. So what I'm going to do, and this is going to be one of the challenge modules in the video that I've linked in the description, I'm going to set up a fanning module that is not connected to our Frogports or anything, and basically just has chutes going down to get fanned. From there, try your best to link it up to our Frogports, as I've explained basically with this pressing system, and see if you can do it yourself. There are plenty of ways to do this, so if it's not the exact answer that I have, that's perfectly fine. So I made a pretty compact fan module. This is not connected to any Frogports or anything like that. There are 2 ways that you can build this. The first way is setting up a barrel for each one of these, containing the items that you are intending to process each with a Frogport on top set for each of the fanning options. So haunting, this one's smelting, smoking, and washing. What this will do is any items meant for washing or any of the other options will go into our barrel, get turned into the item form, and dropped out in front of our fan here. It will then get converted, and I've already set the filters so that when it is converted, it'll get picked up and put on this belt here. That is probably the easier way to do this. I honestly would probably go this route if I wasn't me. The other option, and I'm not going to do this for every single one, but I wanted to give a hybrid option a try, so let's do it that way instead. We can grab ourselves a bunch of different saws, and we're going to have our packages go across these saws to then break the item's contents and drop them directly into our chute here. We're going to need belts to connect these up, and I'm going to have it go all the way along like so. In order to filter which package goes where, I'm going to have tunnels going all the way across here, and we'll put package filters there in a second. But then over on this side, we're going to have our packager and our barrel, which drops out our packages onto this belt here. I'm going to set our Frogport name to fan:**, which will pick up any package with the name starting with fan and then the colon. From there, we're going to grab package filters, set one of them to smelting. That's going to go above the smelting, washing for washing, smoking, and finally haunting. This works basically the same as the other module we've used, except we're using one Frogport and no packagers so far, and a lot more expensive stuff instead. Yeah, I don't really know why I go this route. It's just, it looks nicer, I think. At least it feels like it does. Maybe that's just me inhaling some copium. From here, we can set up our output system, which is going to be super simple. We're going to set a package Frogport here. We're going to get items going into it. And there we go. We are basically done. I'd like to throw in a pulse timer here just to make sure that it powers it frequently. Now, all we have to do is connect this thing up to power. And that is all now done as well. I've already hooked up our packagers to the right spots. The only thing I'll want to add is adding our package addresses to our clipboard for easy access. And there we go, all added in. Now we can get in anything that requires fanning. So that's going to include our nether quartz, which is going to require washing. Let's also do the math on this as well. We have a 12% chance for each soul sand that we make to give us 4 nether quartz. That math works out to 50 soul sand gives us 24 nether quartz on average. As I say, this is an average, which means we set the promised duration to the maximum 30 minutes. We could do the same thing for gold. Gold has a 2% chance of dropping 1 nugget per soul sand washed, which is very low odds. This means that for every 50 soul sand, we're going to get 1 gold nugget expected. We also get to set up haunting now as well. So we're going to set the recipe for this to be 64 to 64 and smelting. Let's also set this to, we want 10 stacks of this at all time. Not 61 items, 10 stacks. There we go. And so far, that is everything that we can check off our list. I have just now added a bunch of raw copper because I went mining in my creative world. And this has now sent out some packages so that we can test out our system. We should see our package get picked up and immediately go into the smelting section. Hovering underneath, we can see it is indeed smelting. So that means at least that one section works. I suspect everything else will work as well. So let's move on to the next most prevalent one. And I think that's going to be crushing our cobblestone into gravel and then sand. The next challenge is upon us with our crushing wheel system. I've decided to make this a double deep crushing wheel system just so you can see how easy it is to pre-build your modules for larger expansions. Right now, we're probably not going to reach the max speed of a crushing wheel and need to buff up our crushing wheel system, but perhaps once we've double or tripled the amount of factory gauges that we have, we may be churning through our gravel and we need to crush way more per second. You can always add more of these later, but I would keep caution with that for the ones that need multiple different types of items in the same processing unit, like a crafting system. For this though, it is as simple as this. All we need to do now is convert this into a Frogport arised module. We have a little bit of a challenge here since the Frogport can't go above our chain conveyors. Thankfully though, we could just raise this up. That was easy. It might not look the best, but it will function. We can name this crushing, and that is our top section done. The bottom section can be done just as easily. And all we need to do now is send out a pulse timer. And with our packager and pulse timer down, that is pretty much everything that we need for this little setup. There is one issue though, And I've actually done it over here as well. You might see, I think I'm missing a sign. So let's fix that now. And always make sure that you put signs on your packagers. But with that quick system, our crushing wheels are done. So what we can do is set our sand processing to a stack and a stack, send it to the crushing system, and let's bump it up to 10 stacks. We can do the same thing with crushing gravel, stack and a stack, send it to crushing, and it will start going as soon as we farm up some cobblestone. And just like a magical fairy delivering your money under the pillow after you lost a tooth, we have cobblestone coming out and heading over to our crushing system. I'm not even gonna watch that, you've seen it happen. Now that we have sand, I actually totally missed the haunting part of sand into soul sand, which we've already done. Isn't that just beautiful? I'm gonna set this to, actually, let's do 10 stacks because we're gonna need a ton of quartz. Now that we're generating soul sand though, we can also request a ton of quartz and request a ton of nuggets. One thing I forgot is that this nugget recipe is percentage based, so make sure you set this to promising expires in 30 minutes. The final big module that we need to get in before crafting has to do with wood cutting. As you saw, the recipe for planks requires a sawing system, and it's good to get a sawing system in now. Similar to our fan system, it's probably a good idea to set up sawing so that you have multiple modules for multiple different sawing recipes. The reason for this is if, let's grab a recipe for birch planks and go over to the sawing tab. Birch planks can be used to saw up to 3 different pages of items. If, let's say, you want to saw birch stairs from birch planks, which does give you a better return, you will not be able to, on the same saw birch slabs. The reason for this is because, well, let's say we have a saw and we throw on a birch plank, it will randomly choose what item it wants to make. So that time it made doors, and this time it's going to make something completely different. Trapdoors. See? Totally different, not even close to the same. So what's going to happen if you set 2 filters for the same sourcing ingredient is it'll just pick randomly, which is something we don't want. So for a sawing module, I usually have 4 or 5 different sawing kind of lanes where I can choose and set the filters as I please. The sawing module is another one of those modules that I'm a big fan of, sawing the package as it's put into the lane so that it will immediately deliver the items onto the next saw, which actually does the sawing to get our desired output. There's not a real reason for this other than it makes it look pretty cool. So the next setup is configuring our sawing system up to our chain conveyors. Again, this is super duper easy. All we'll want to do is set up a packager for output, make sure we have a sine and a pulse timer configured for it, and then we'll need to do the same for our input, which can just barely reach. That's fantastic. And again, I'm naming this saw : asterisk, and we'll set up our package filters over on our tunnels here. I just named them saw 1, 2, 3, 4. You can name them anything you find descriptive, it doesn't matter. As long as you know what they are and they match whatever you're trying to send requesters to in the factory gauges. So once we've connected this to power, this whole thing should work, so we can get in our wood supply now. Before we can get to actually making any of these things though, we definitely need to set filters for the saws that we're going to be using. Since I'm going saw 1 to 4, I'm going to probably start with saw 1 here. This first saw, as a reminder, is just for sawing the package. We don't need to set a filter for this one. We do need to set a filter for the second one, however, and this is just going to be your standard attribute or list filter. For me, I'm going to do list filter because I know exactly what I'm going to be making from these. You may want to do attribute filters if you're trying to make every stripped log, every plank, and every slab. And there's also one other thing that I want to do, shafts, because they have a little bit better of an output. So let's do all of those. We can plonk that in our first one. And for right now, that's going to be the only one that I use. So now that we have our list filters set up, we can go through and configure these. So this first one, slabs have a 2-to-1 conversion rate. We get 2 slabs per birch plank. And this is going to our first saw. And let's just set this to 6 stacks. The same is true for this one. This one's actually 1 to 6, which means 10 stripped birch planks are getting us 10 stripped birch logs are getting us 60 planks. Going to saw 1 as well. Logs to stripped logs is a 1-to-1, so we could do a full stack for that. And I already have logs submitted in our storage system. So when I send those off, those packages will start going off as well, which is fantastic. The last thing we need is this module, which is a 1-to-6 conversion, similar to our birch planks. So we can set that up and we can configure this for now. It's not going to work until we get enough andesite alloys to actually supply that though. I do think it's officially the point where we need to get a crafting module set up here. And this is where I've been saving a couple of key features. And you may have noticed from the very beginning of the video that happened so long ago, I have not talked a single second about the repackager. That is going to change. This thing, at least in the beginning, is very confusing. I understand that it's very confusing. I am going to try my best to explain it. It's actually so useful, and it's kind of easy. It's a little bit easy. It kind of, you'll get it. I'm good at explaining things, I bet. We'll try it at least. What I'm going to do to explain this repackager is actually not start with a crafting module, because that thing is also pretty complicated. Instead, what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with a mixing module. So to create our mixing module, I'm going to set up just 3 basins here, and we're actually going to do it a little bit taller with mixers on top of them. These 3 mixers are going to be used to craft our cogwheels, large cogwheels, and andesite alloy. They're all going to output onto this output belt here, and the input is going to come from behind. To demonstrate the importance of a repackager, I am going to build this in the incorrect way to show you exactly what's going to happen. We're going to have the same setup here where we're using 3 distinct saw types, and I'm still going to use the tunnel system with belts. Now that we have our mixing module, we're going to be setting this up in the same way that we always do, setting Frogports where needed. This is going to be our mixing : asterisk, and this one is going to be our sending Frogport. With this setup now, what is the issue with this build? If you can name it in the comments, definitely let me know. And it's not the package filters that I forgot. It is, in fact, the fact that we don't have a repackager in the system, and let me prove it to you. Let's go ahead and set up our andesite alloy to be mixed together. We are going to need 64 of each of these to create 64 andesite alloy, and these are going to be going to the mixing for andesite alloy. I have gone ahead and put in a bunch of andesite and a bunch of iron nuggets into our storage system, but I've made it a little bit differently than just plonking it all into the one item vault. I have set up this new barrel for andesite storage, pretending to be maybe an andesite farm that I have separate to my standard storage location. Now that we have both of these, we should expect that if we request a ton of andesite alloys, let's do 20 or so, we should see both of these packages being sent out, one for nuggets and one for andesite storage, which I just have absolutely forgotten to put up here. And we should see both of these sending out a ton of packages to get sent over to our mixing station. We are going to start getting a bunch of packages being sent over here, and eventually they'll get stored in this barrel so that we can look at them. As you can see, we are getting andesite and iron nuggets intermittently, which is actually really good news, as you'll see in a second. I do need to wait for this to all go away though, so let's actually just speed this up. There we go. As we'll see in a second, which it looks like it's already happening, this mechanical saw just has iron nuggets inside of it, and our basin is full of iron nuggets and barely out of andesite. We have been lucky enough that the chute has picked the right items this time, but I'm suspecting that pretty soon we will get unlucky enough and potentially get 2 sets of andesite in a row. What that'll mean is our andesite alloy crafting is absolutely backed up, and even though it's continuously accepting more packages, we won't get any more andesite alloy being made because it's backed itself up. It can't fit in any more andesite into this basin. And you might be thinking, oh, we could get around that by dropping more andesite in there. You're thinking of it the wrong way, because repackagers are a thing. The reason this flaw exists in general is because we're sending packages from 2 different sources, our storage system and our andesite storage system. You're going to have this in your farms. Your farms are probably going to store items for certain things in different places. You may even run into issues where one massive item vault is not going to be enough, so you're going to need 2 or 3 of them. And in that case, it's going to be even more common that you're getting packages from different locations. What a repackager does is it basically combines the 2 packages being sent out by different locations into a singular package that then can be processed like we would hope and expect, providing a stack of iron nuggets and a stack of andesite in a single package to get processed as a whole. What this will do is it'll keep all of the packages that are waiting for their andesite or iron nugget pair in the barrel waiting to be created. In order to update our design and build here, all we have to do is add a repackager to the system. We could do that as simply as this. The repackager works basically the same way as a normal packager does, except it packages packages. That was fun to say, but it's true. It packages existing packages and pairs them up with their partner. So what it'll do is it'll grab our iron nugget and andesite package and pair them up so that it then becomes an iron nugget andesite package. We could test this out pretty easily just by getting a lever or providing another redstone signal in another way and turning on our packager. You can see requests a package. And as you can also see, every single one of our packages in here only has either iron nuggets or andesite. We'll see here though that this combined package has both, fixing our problem and making it so that if we were to clear this out, it will make our andesite alloy system finally start working yet again. So that is generally how the repackager works. Let's turn this on and finish up our processing. Now let's see if we can combine our repackager with something else very helpful. Crafting is, and I will truly say this, the most complicated module that you can probably make because it's a little bit weird about how it works. I'm not sure how it works in the game. Like everything else, I can kind of picture how it makes sense. But crafting is one of the things that's like, I don't even know how they did it, which makes it really hard to understand how to build it in the game. So for this, I'm actually going to go a step-by-step guide on how to build a crafting system to interact with our packages. And I think this is a perfect spot to do it. Before you start, it's best to understand what your needs are for your factory. If you're trying to automate a lot of items, even honestly this many items, it's likely that you're going to be crafting a lot of those items. What this means is that you're going to be ingesting a lot of packages that are going to need storage until their repackaged partner shows up. Basically what I'm saying is, if let's say we're making a transmitter and we have a lightning rod being sent and then separately some of the other ingredients being sent, the lightning rod package is going to need a space to wait. So I recommend creating at least a decent sized vault. It doesn't have to be this hefty, but I have seen even a 3x3x2 vault fill up fully. So the bigger, the better. You don't need to go too crazy though. I see you building the max size item vault. That might be a little overkill, unless you're putting down a bunch of crafters. The next thing you need to think about is how many crafters do you think you'll actually need? One set of crafters can produce items at a pretty quick speed, but let's say you're automating every item in the game. Even these 20 pages, you'll probably want 2 or 3 sets of mechanical crafters, or they'll be pretty slow. I'll be building an item vault here with a crafter in front of it. I'm just going to be doing a one crafting module to show you how it works, but I have multi-crafting modules on my channel if you're interested in that sort of thing. This is my setup so far. We have our item vault that we're going to get items into, and let's actually set that up now. I'm just going to name this crafter. I sometimes like having 2 of these because so many items get sent to the crafter that it's probably good to have 2 Frogports to pick them all up. Once we have our packages in the item vault here, we're going to need a way to make sure, similar to what we just saw here, that with every package is a valid and working recipe for that package. For right now though, I'm going to actually do it in the incorrect way to show you what not to do. So right now we have packages going into our item vault here, and all we have to do is output those packages onto a belt and put them into our crafter. So we have this belt going towards a depot, which is going to be the ending spot for a package to end up before it gets thrown into the crafter. In order for our crafter to work and be compatible with packages and such, we actually need to turn this from a standard crafting grid, which looks something like this, to one that is compatible. The way you do that is by pulling out a wrench and hovering over all of these connectors on the back side of the crafter. When you do that, you'll see a little thing pop up and you can right click those to get rid of them. What this does is it combines our 3x3 crafter into a working object that the game somehow understands and knows that this is now a package accepting crafting grid. This means that we can load packages into it with a packager, and as long as the package has a valid recipe, it will go into the crafter, no questions asked, it will craft it up, and the crafter will immediately spit it out into whatever the output is. For us, it'll be this block here. From there, we can set up an output system, just using a Frogport and our standard functionality. This set to send mode. Let's grab ourselves a sign sending it back to storage and a pulse repeater just to power it every once in a while. And that is our crafting setup, again, with the incorrect assumption that we don't need a repackager. So let's see how this thing works. Let's go over here, and we're actually already out of cobblestone. So it's probably worth making myself just maybe a full nether vault for cobblestone specifically. I'm gonna just build it on top of our existing vault because, I mean, we're so low on space. We kind of need to be compact here. So I've gone ahead and made our cobblestone storage, and let's test out our crafting machine. So what I want to do is automate diorite first, since this uses cobblestone and quartz, both of which we have now plenty of. What we can do is use the use mechanical crafting button in the crafting grid, and it will automatically create the recipe that we need and the output that's expected from it. We can set the destination to crafter, and since this is a guaranteed output, we don't need to set the promise to expire. From here, let's just request, I don't know, 20 pieces of diorite. What we should see is both of these packages come out. I bet the front one here is going to have quartz and the back one having cobblestone. Those will eventually get picked up by our Frogports and dropped out to be put into a packager. However, you could see that, well, first of all, the packager is now waiting to put in our cobblestone, which is right here, even though it shouldn't be. I mean, it should know that the recipe is ready for it. But for whatever reason, since we're getting different packages arriving at different times, the packages don't know their own recipe. So what happens if we do it the right way and use a repackager? A repackager, as I mentioned, will combine packages that are expected to be combined, and that makes it possible to have packages coming from all over the place and still work as expected. So let's set up a repackager here, connect it up, and you can see it's working right away. So the next question you might be asking is, when should you use a repackager? I didn't use it for crushing wheels. I didn't use it for the fan system. I didn't use it for pressing, but I did use it for both mixing and our automated crafting. Well, the answer is pretty simple. Basically, if you require multiple different items to perform whatever task you're looking to automate, whether it's craft an item or mix an item or saw an item even, if that's a thing, if you need multiple different items for it, then it should have a repackager. For everything that doesn't need multiple different items, let's say sawing a piece of wood only requires the wood, and that is basically guaranteed. You're only sawing one thing into one thing. For crushing wheels, you're crushing something into something else. For fanning, you're fanning something into something else. For pressing, you're pressing something into something else. The difference with mixing is you're mixing multiple things into one object, or you're crafting multiple things into one object. So now we are automating diorite. Let's bump this up to 6 stacks or so, and then we can get to crafting everything else. Our lightning rods can be crafted. Let's get 2 stacks of those. These can also now be crafted, and let's get 2 stacks of those. Our barrels can be crafted. I like a lot of stacks of barrels. These things always seem to run out. Same with our item vaults, set up to be crafted. The way I'm looking to see what may need to be made still is I'm just hovering over and waiting until I see maybe not a green thing, maybe not green letters, or maybe not even letters at all. Let's actually reset this. I think I was breaking it before. Same with you. Andesite still needs to be made. We can set this to crafting and send it off. Now the last thing we need is gold ingots from gold nuggets, which again, crafter. I must have forgotten to set our gold ingots to gold sheet crafting system. Let's get 10 ingots of those, 10 ingots of those. I've also forgot to set our cogwheel. This is actually not going to be set to crafting since we have a mixing setup for this. And the same is true for large cogwheels. We're going to set this to 32 shafts, and 64 planks gives us 32 large cogwheels. And we can set both of these to make 3 stacks. Okay, so that is almost the entire process. I forgot to set this thing to crafting. Let's do that as well. As I said, that's pretty much the whole process. The last thing we have to do are our precision mechanisms, and finally, the factory gauges, which we could do. So the last step is precision mechanisms. This is going to require a separate module, and this one is actually pretty fun to build, and it should be able to use basically everything that we've learned so far, and I need you to remember the repackager. I have run into probably the most amount of issues with the precision mechanism farm. It combines 2 main things that you may forget about. First of all, since this is not a guaranteed chance, we are going to need to set a promise expiration time. That also means that if this backs up, we're going to keep sending more resources to try to make more, backing it up further, and if you go AFK or you're loading chunks on a server without you being online, it may back up your whole system and cause a bunch of issues. This has happened so many times, I bet you can tell from the experience that I'm talking about. So we need to make sure this works well and doesn't have any issues. We need to speed this thing up. This thing is going crazy. Let's bump that bad boy up and see it zoom. Go, go, go. Craft those items. Yeah, the crafter is probably gonna get overloaded, but that's all right. We need to get 2 precision mechanisms. I'm gonna plonk this final module over on the end over on this side, and I'm actually gonna use an existing and pretty common / popular precision mechanism design and processing module that you might have seen before. We're gonna set up all of our deployers going across like this, and we're gonna set up a brass funnel there and a brass funnel going into our item vault to cycle it back. This is going to happen 5 times over, so it's gonna be a long process. Over on this side, we'll have our golden sheets enter in on this block here to then get processed. We'll have our output over on this side, and then that can connect up to our Frogports. Now comes the challenging part. We need a way to get our items into each of these deployers, and there are a few challenges we need to address. First of all, we're going to need a repackager since we're using multiple items to create one singular item at the end. Before we can get to that though, I think let's set up maybe a little bit of a system to get our items into our deployers from above. I like it being above just because, I mean, we could do it in front, but it would block our view. So I'm just going to choose to do it above. This is a creative game. You can do whatever you want. I'll use chutes to grab the items from above to make sure they are filtered properly. So to set our filters, we're going to have gold here, cogwheel, large cogwheel, nugget. Since we're having our gold sheet be here, we're going to need to set up our package deconstructor, whatever that may be, right here. For this, I'm going to use a saw. We'll need a block on the end to prevent items from going off, and we'll need to connect everything to power. I've done this in a really ugly way. You could probably make it look better if you wish. The next step is something I've learned from basically a year of making, improving, and working on this module. We're going to need to grab some tunnels to set filters for these. I don't know if this is the best way to do it, but it's the best way that I've found to do it. The reason I do this is because when a package is destroyed by a saw, there is no consistent order or format with which the package is deconstructed, which means we could have a package that goes perfectly in order or that goes in the perfect reverse order. What may happen is if these are all full with the correct items and a package in reverse order comes through, our small cogwheels might make it all the way to the end of the line, which would obviously be an issue. What we can do to prevent this is plump down a brass funnel here, get ourselves a list filter for large cogwheels and iron nuggets, put it on the entrance side, and make sure iron nuggets can only come out the end. This will mean only iron nuggets can be here, iron nuggets and large cogwheels can be here, which is good, and anything other than small cogwheels and gold sheets cannot go through. I'm not going to put a tunnel here, and so far in my testing, I haven't run into issues with the low chance of a gold sheet making it to this block, but that may happen for you. And if it does, let me know, because I'm kind of curious. But now that we have this set up, we need our repackager. I'm going to put down our barrel here with a repackager connected to it. We can connect up our Frogport like so, set this to precision mechanism, and turn this on. From there, we need a funnel to drop out our package to get crushed, and then everything else should work as anticipated. I'm going to throw in another chute there, and we can test this thing out officially now. I suppose it's probably also worth, before we get too ahead of ourselves, setting up our output system here, since this is relatively easy to do. Set a sign over on this side, and our occasional toggle there. We're also running into bottleneck issues with our storage system. This is actually something that I've run into quite frequently, and is why I now recommend having two separate Frogports. One for accepting items, let's name this one storage, and our Frogport that is designated for sending out items with our stock link, we want to set to only send items. That'll make it so that this one's always receiving packages, this one's always sending them out, and they don't have to work as hard trying to do both. But now we can try out our precision mechanism. All we have to do is set the destination there, and let's set this to 33 items. We should see in a second a few packages arrive with our desired ingredients in them. There is part of the first one, and we should see everything start to get to be processed. So what are we waiting for? Oh, of course I didn't power this belt. That'll do it. There we go. One thing I forgot to do while this is spinning around, it actually reminded me, we need to set a filter to this funnel to an incomplete mechanism. So make sure you grab one of these incomplete mechanisms on the belt. And this is going quite slow, so let's speed this up. Yeah, to full speed. To watch it go, make sure it all works. Well, that is the 20% failure rate, but we do have our first fully automated precision mechanism created and built up here. Soon enough, that'll get sent back out to our storage system, where we should see this number go up, and our factory gauges start to be able to be crafted. Let's set this to 3 stacks, which, yeah, great, we're not hitting yet, which should mean that we get the factory gauge crafting recipe popping in here in a second. There it is. There we go. 100% fully automated factory gauges, all in this video, in a tutorial. You should be grateful. It's 1 AM. Oh boy, does this take a while. I was in creative. I had it easy. It will take you quite a while to get through everything that I went through in this video, so definitely take your time. Be patient. Some of these things take a while to run anyway, so you're not in a rush. So with all these modules, we have fully automated factory gauges. There is, however, one additional module that I think is pretty helpful, but also pretty complicated, and that is one that could make andesite casing or brass casing or copper casing, because it requires both a log and one of those other objects to be right-clicked onto the log with a deployer. But building a casing farm is something that obviously is incredibly important. Casings are used for so many different items in the Create mod. It just so happened that we didn't have to cover it in this one, that I thought, let's also build that quickly to show you how it works. So I'm gonna actually try to squeeze this in right next to our crushing wheel system. I think I'll have the space to do it. What I'm gonna do is set up an output belt here first and have our deployer right-clicking our item into it. Once we get to that point, it will anyway. What we need over here is a way to get our logs down onto this belt here. And then we also need a way for our deployer to get whatever items it is that we need. So at this point, I think it's worth checking out all of the different casing types that you can make. I would also recommend a sandpaper because this has the same functionality. The sandpaper is basically the same thing as an andesite alloy. It's the same recipe, it's just a slightly different idea. So we probably want to do both of these types of things, which means in our deployer, we need to have andesite alloy, brass ingots, copper ingots, sturdy sheets, and sandpaper as options to go into here. What that'll mean is a list filter, probably. We're already quite at a height limit with our chains and potential Frogport ability here. Like, this is the highest that can go. If we try to put it one more, it's not going to connect. Maybe we do something different. What if we had our input belt horizontally next to this thing, and then we could have funnels going in to each of our objects here. This might be something that you could think would work, but from experience, we're gonna probably want a buffer between our deployer and the belt system. Because let's say we have multiple different casing types being requested at the same time. Let's say we want copper casings being sent and andesite casings being sent. There's a super high likelihood that a copper ingot is going to come through. It's going to go in here, and then our logs are going to go in here. And while the deployer is deploying, we might have an andesite alloy come through, and that won't be able to get picked up by the funnel. So what I would recommend is to split up our items before they get to the required location. So we could still use funnels to go into here, but we're probably going to want tunnels to separate our items between the things that are going on the deployer and the things that are being deployed on before we get to that point. And let's also extend this belt by one so we can get our input going in. I'm going to use an item vault for our input just because we can. And for this module, we are going to need a repackager. Remember the rule, if there's multiple different items as inputs, which there are, then we need a repackager. Them's the rules, I don't make them. Let's scooch this down. We need a repackager here, and then we can put our saw there to depackage the repackaged package. I said that in a confusing way just because it's fun. But we can saw this bad boy, and all we need to do is for that to go onto this belt here, which will then be split up. We can make this section a little bit more affordable by replacing our chutes and replacing our funnels with the cheaper versions of those, because we only really need the filters on our chutes themselves. I'm gonna use list filters for both of these, and you might be thinking, how are we gonna list filter when we need every wood type and you don't know what every wood type is? You're actually wrong. All we need is all of the items that we're going to be deployering onto a specific thing. So in this case, it could be any of the different sandpaper types, as well as any of the different ingot types, and that will be our filter for the deploying side. The filter for the other side is going to be a deny list of all of these things, so everything but those things. And that's the whole filter process. Now that we have everything connected up to power, we can try to test this thing. I obviously have to put a funnel there. And of course, we need packager to send out and Frogports on this thing. This is going to be named casing crafting. And then this is our output one. So now that we have that set up, let's grab ourselves a new factory gauge and create one for andesite casing and for copper casing, just to show both of them working at the same time. So we're going to set both of those up. I need to set our package name in our clipboard. I've been going through and doing this every time, and I really recommend you doing the same. I know this is an hour into the tutorial, so it might be too late, but make sure you do that. And we're gonna set these to the necessary items to get our casing crafting set up. I like doing a stack of everything just again so that our package lines don't fill up with a bunch of different packages. So we can do that for both of you. We're going to set you to 64, 64, 64, and casing crafting. Now, I want 5 stacks of each of these things. And oh, there is one thing I totally forgot. We're gonna need to power our repackager. I'm gonna use just a lever to do this on the top. There's not really an issue with it being powered all the time like this, but what we can see is we have our copper going in there, our logs going in there, and we're making copper casings. Isn't that brilliant? Okay, let's speed this up. That's not the right one. This one. Bonk. To see this go at full speed. We can already see that we have andesite alloy here, and our next set of logs are ready to go. And we can see that we are obviously making both copper casings and andesite casings at the same time, which means these numbers should start going up. But that is how you use factory gauges, how you use create mod, post-production, packages, Frogports, packagers, repackagers, and everything that has to do with everything that is important at all in the create mod. Oh boy, this was a crazy video. I hope you all enjoyed. If you did, leave a like, show your support in the comments. Is there anything I missed? Is there anything you're still confused about? And I can hopefully answer some of the common ones in the comments down below. But this is going to do it for this video. Like and subscribe. I will be coming out with more videos in the future. I have Let's Plays and stuff if you haven't seen my channel before. But thank you all so much for watching. I will see you all in the next one. Peace!